thank you for this opportunity to share part of my adoption story. I have some of this scripted and some of it is not, but as we all know, the Lord scripted all of it, and then we'll see where it takes us here. But so events that happened in the 1940s changed the trajectory of my life. But let me pause right there for a moment. There have been over 100 billion people that have lived, and my story is just a speck of sand in God's infinite sovereignty. So to put my story into a gospel perspective, an event that happened over 2,000 years ago changed all of our trajectories. One of the strongest tests of faith is to lean not on our own understanding, but to let go of trying to comprehend how immeasurable God is. We make daily choices, and the choices that we make, He knew that we would make them infinity lifetimes ago. As I share my adoption story, I want to really relate it to God's sovereignty. In my story, I'm reminded of a song by the Casting Crowns called Praise You in the Storm, where they use part of Psalm 121, and the lyrics are, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And so, of course, I'm very thankful for my parents. But as I've grown in my faith, I know that it was God that created them and prepared them to be my parents. And although I did grow up with several pockets of racism, I was very fortunate at the family that I was adopted into. There were many trials that led to triumphs, and ultimately, no matter how many peaks and valleys we go through or how many battles we win or lose, we're all fortunate when we're adopted into Christ's family. God is our master potter. Life outcomes, good or bad, are part of how He is shaping us. And the beauty of His sovereignty is that He knows what will happen, and we get to live it out. So as I share my story, I want people to know that all of our scripts have been written. And you being here right now, listening and me speaking, is no mistake. So with that, I'd like to call on my assistant, my wife, to hand out my father in the fall of 2015. I drove to Wisconsin, Wausau, Wisconsin, my hometown, to interview him to find out what led to my adoption. I was 45, 46 years old at the time. And I had a whole bunch of questions, but I didn't get to ask very many because it seemed that he knew what I was there for. And I asked him if I could record. He said, of course. And he spoke for about 4 hours. And it was incredible. So, that evening really changed my perspective on who I was. But it was the best evening of my life. So, as I gather my thoughts here, reading from left to right, that's my wife. The story of how we met, I'll tell really quickly. I was in a parking lot getting into a car with one of my friends, and as fate would have it, the wind blew, and I turned around, and she was on the other side of the parking lot, and we just started walking towards each other and had a conversation, and here we are some 30 years later. There's a lot more detail to that. The next photo, you have myself with my daughter in 2014, and then also my son a couple weeks ago. So I have been the track and field coach at Illinois Wesleyan I just finished my 25th year. And in 2014, I had the opportunity, my daughter was a conference champion in the javelin, and then my son was a conference champion a couple weeks ago in the 200. So that was just an incredible opportunity to be there and be part of that. But as I go through this, I want people to understand the sovereignty of all the things that had to have taken place for it to happen. So as you move on to the next photo, That's my father in 1946, and that's not me in 1946. That is me my freshman year of high school. I just kind of photoshopped that in there. And so when he was in the Navy, he witnessed a lot of terrible things, and he learned a lot about himself in regards to race. And so for the next 22 years, he was unwittingly preparing to be my father. And so he became a very strong humanitarian civil rights activist. He went on and he held 3 master's degrees. I had him for 3 classes: exposition, American literature and advanced composition, C-, C+, A- as I moved on. But I learned so much from him in his classes, but also obviously in life. And he did fail one of my older siblings in one of the classes. So the next photo, that is me in 1975 and my birth mother in 1955. Now I've never met her, but again, relating it to sovereignty, without her and without the strength that she had to carry me and put me up for adoption, none of these things take place. Moving down to the next photo, you got my siblings, 1967, a year before I was added to the family. And then you can see there in the next photo, 1968, when I was added to the family. 1977, 4th grade, I'm circled there. And I was the only person of color in my family in the elementary school, my middle school, and my high school, and really the entire community until I was much older. So a census taken in 1970, a couple of years after I was born, there were 4 people of color in a town of over 30,000, and that included me in that census. So it was pretty different for me.
Where was that?
Wausau, Wisconsin. Yep. And without my father, you can see in the next photo, 1978, how he helped me navigate through life. It really helped prepare me for the things that I would do and eventually becoming a track and field coach at Illinois Wesleyan University. The next photo, I don't know if you can see, I'm standing in front, you might not be able to tell, but I'm holding up a finger like this. That was 1987. I was very fortunate to be part of Wisconsin Lacrosse's first track and field national championship team. And since then, they have won 28 indoor and outdoor national championships, something that has never been done by any other school at that level. And then the next photo over, 2016, very, very fortunate to have coached. That was the 4th national championship that our women's program had won at Illinois Wesleyan. And going back again, none of those things take place without all of the other things that led to the moment. Next photo over, there I am hugging 3 of the athletes. That is 2016. That is prior to the photo on the left. And so what happened there was the indoor conference championship, they had taken 1, 2, 3 in the long jump. And they knew that it was a moment that wasn't going to happen again because 2 of them were seniors, 1 was a sophomore, and someone captured that photo. And the girl in the middle, outdoor in 2016, she's from Tremont, Illinois. She won a national championship in the long jump that year. The girl on the right, on my left in the photo, so we were favored to win the 4x1 relay that day. And there's what's called an exchange zone, and you have to get a zone, and we ended up being disqualified. And so those were 8 or 10 points that I thought we were going to have to win a national championship. And I was pretty upset. And then the tall girl on my right and to your left, I'm out in the middle of the field coaching her in the triple jump. And I said, hey, did you see what just happened? She said, I did. And I could see on her face, I said, well, what are we going to do? And she says, it's go time. So she was in 7th place at the time, Her next jump, she came down and jumped to move to third place, which got some of those points back. She set the school record. And so then the girl who ran out of the exchange zone was 8th seeded in the 100. She ended up getting second. So as a team, we ended up scoring more points between those two events than we had originally planned, and then we ended up winning that national championship. 2013, that is the second to the last family photo with my siblings and my parents still alive. My last name's Schumacher. We would have what was called the annual Shoe Fest, and that's just a good photo for me to reminisce about. And my siblings, a lot of them, with the exception of my brother who's closest to me in age, they're more like aunts and uncles because they're so much older than me. They were gone before I had a lot of my memories, but they would come back at Christmas and they really helped shape who I was. And I just have to say that until my first nephew was born, Christmas was awesome for me. The picture there, that is Janina. Her name was Janina Taylor, Janina Baker. So I really had to fight to get her, and all of the things that led me to there, gave me the strength and the understanding of how important it was for her to be there. She was, I met with her parents, I knew that she was going to be very successful. And so she got there, and she ended up really helped changing our program around, but more importantly, the things that she has done with her life since graduation. In 2020, you can see named, I can probably get rid of the bottom there, Central Illinois Business Magazine Woman of the Year. So the next photo over, that's my wife and me and our son, Keandre. He went to Winthrop University on a Division I basketball scholarship, but he didn't know he was going there to learn more about the gospel. And the growth that we've had together, but that he has had, has been amazing. So he went to University High School, and most of his life was built around playing basketball. That's all he wanted to do. That's what he worked for. And he worked himself to earning a Division I basketball scholarship, and he thought that was it, He wanted to go play overseas. And had he stayed there, who knows, maybe that's what he would have done, but that's not what God had planned. And as fate would have it, he transferred back to Illinois Wesleyan University. And he had a great experience there. He didn't leave there sad. He didn't leave there like I'm homesick, I need to come home. And it was a really tough decision. But ultimately, he wanted to come here and play basketball at Illinois Wesleyan. And he did. And he played here for 2 years, and he had some really good success. And he made some great friends. He's got a great relationship with the coaches. But as he continued to grow in his faith and grew stronger and knew more of the things that he wanted to do, basketball became less and less of a passion for him. And then at the beginning of last year, at the start of the basketball season, right before the basketball season started, he decided that he just wanted to participate in track and field. So after his second year at Illinois Wesleyan, and first of all, he's on the 6-year plan for college, which is pretty awesome. But because of COVID and because of a redshirt year, he had that opportunity. So after his second year at Wesleyan, he came out for track and field, and he had a really good experience with that. And then going into that season last year, he decided he was just going to focus on track and field. But when he was at Winthrop University, he found a really strong, small, gospel-centered church. And so when he transferred back here, he knew that's what he wanted to find. And I don't remember how he discovered Christ Church, but he was coming here for about 2 weeks, and then he invited us to come over. And so we've been coming here for coming up on 3 years now. Coming up on 3 years now. And so again, all of the things that had to have taken place for that to happen, going all the way back to my father in 1946, the things that he saw, and my birth mother carrying me. And so at commencement this year, that last photo, I was awarded with a very humbling honor. Something that I'm still kind of blown away that they awarded it to me. But none of those things happened without all of the things in God's sovereignty, and He knew all along. And I just want people to understand that, we don't have to have a strong testimonial story. I think that mine is kind of unique where I grew up. The important thing is that, you're following the gospel and believing in the footsteps that God has laid out for you. And I'm excited to have shared this, and I welcome any questions. In 1968, and I was adopted in 1968. The adoption wasn't finalized until 1969. There was some difficulties in the community, and my dad had to stand up in the courtroom. The judge was going to deny the adoption, and my father's attorney didn't know what he was going to say, and my father eventually So, the knowledge that he had prepared, well, I do want to say one thing. When my mom brought up the idea of adoption to my father, he was initially against it, and he said, you're crazy. We've got 6 kids already. How can we afford it? And she called him a hypocrite and said that he was a leader at the church, an elder at the church, and he stood up for a lot of things. And when that moment came, and then he knew that she was right. But the two of them together unwittingly, like I said, prepared. And so when that time came in the courtroom, he knew exactly what to say, even though he didn't know what to say. But he said what was right, and the judge ultimately granted the adoption.
I'm very curious about your father because, I'm sure he's an imperfect man, but I want to distill everything that he did right and as an adopted dad, copy it. Because, when I talked to Chris, we're trying to figure out where would be a good place for him to talk. He says, I didn't really have that many negative experiences. I said, well, that's no good. I didn't have that negative. I said, whoa. So maybe I'm sure you've thought about it. Maybe you've run into people that didn't have positive experiences from their father. What kind of stands out? And by the way, watch the videos. I'm laughing because I could just imagine your dad in court. I don't pity the judge, right? He didn't stand a chance. But
yeah. So there were obvious and glaring challenges that I faced. But like Tom said last week, I was able to be a kid. My parents and my family protected me from a lot of the things that were being said. And yeah, in elementary school and middle school, there were some challenges. Being an athlete really helped, especially as I got older, because trying to find my own identity. Athletics gave me some confidence that I might not have had, and that those things really helped propel my career. But referring to my father, there's an incident, and you were talking about something from when you were like 6 years old. There's an incident when I was 7 or 8 that really stood out to me, and that was the first time my dad sat me down and explained to me, who I was, and even though I didn't know all of the reasons that they adopted, but from that moment forward, I didn't have like curiosity or frustrations with why my hair was different or my skin color was different, but he had a way, and I wish I could remember what he said in that moment to comfort me, but it was incredible.
I'm so curious to know how their paths crossed with yours. How did they find you, and what's that story?
How did they find me?
Yeah. What was the occasion?
So my parents, they read a lot of books together, and they were very, very educated, very I call them necessary pioneers, especially in 1968. And there were some articles that they read about all the different orphans that were left from Vietnam. And when they had that opportunity, my mom was really pressing it, and my dad wasn't exactly on board initially, but he knew that she was right, and they went to an adoption agency. I think it was a Lutheran adoption agency, and my dad told me in this interview that the lady said, if you think we're just going to hand out a baby, that's not going to happen. We want X, Y, and Z to be, and so he made it clear to the adoption agency that they were going to love this child the way that they should.
So you mentioned your parents kind of protected you from a lot of feeling of otherness in the very white community. Did you ever have to reconcile two kind of different identities, or how did that work as you matured?
As I think back to being a kid, I always knew that I was different, but because of how they raised me, if someone were to ask me, what's it like being adopted? I would say, I kind of don't know. Because I just felt like I was one of their children. I never felt that difference. The only difference I felt was when people would say something, or when I would look in the mirror. But it wasn't something that brought me down. And now that I'm older and understand it, I wouldn't change any of it, because it gave me so much strength.
How did you get your birth mother's picture, and what do you know of her background?
That's a great question. So she found me when I was 30. We've never met, and it was initially I was excited, and I wanted to learn about her, and she was excited to find me, but she had romanticized in her mind this grand reunion of me running to her, and she was kind of resentful that I had a good childhood, and I don't want to throw her under the bus or anything like that. But from that point forward, it didn't go well. In my lifetime, I didn't try and find her, because I had my family, and that's all that I knew.
You mentioned that in that conversation with your dad, that it was 4 hours and that it really changed the trajectory of your life. What was most impactful about that? What didn't you know that you learned in that?
Well, as I rewind rewind the clock and listening to him, you know, I didn't know the things that they had protected me from. Like, for example, I didn't know that my sister had nightmares because when she was holding me in the courtroom when the adoption was finalized, and she was 11 or 12, and she didn't know that it was a possibility that I could have been taken, and so that was something I didn't know about. But and then there are things that were said to the family, and even within their church, that they had to have struggles and fight against. But again, I got to live my life, and I didn't know about those things. And so I think that's the most impactful. But you know, towards the end of it, he said that I did more for them than. I just don't know how that's possible. You know, he said, I did more for them than they did for me, and that's not possible. One of the things that I told my biological mom was that the lives that she has impacted, you know, my wife and I have kids and the hundreds of athletes that I've coached that have gone on to, you know, have families of their own, careers of their own. I mean, you know, she's part of that. I try and be as positive as I can with her, but there's a massive wall. And I did tell her that initially that I wanted to get to know her, but it just needed to be slow. I mean, I have my parents and my family, and that was something that really shook her, and she didn't want to be part of that.
You don't even know the answer, but becoming a Christian and trusting in an adopted God maybe was easier. I don't know if that's ever a thought or just more natural. I don't know if that's...
You know, I went to Awana as a kid. I was invited to Awana. I remember the person who invited me. I remember going to Living Waters Bible Camp and accepting Christ. And you know, as a 9 or 10-year-old, you know, I didn't necessarily know what that meant. But looking back, knowing that he was there through all of the steps, but then having this interview, and then talking to my brothers and sisters over the last couple of years and learning many of the things, that has just, and then with my son transferring back and us, you know, doing some Bible studies together, it's just all part of the script that I don't even have to understand. I just have to have faith in it. You know, I've had the opportunity to share my story in different capacities in different places, and every single time I'm confident that I'm not going to cry. And, it just happens. So yeah, thank you.